Hi everyone, this is my video trying to explain my map, which is in itself something of a work in progress. It took me 10 tries, maybe more, to get this because I kind of got hung up on trying to figure out how to work in my classes. But let me start. My threads paper was about Montori's Joy of Learning and it led me to what's called punk pedagogy. And punk pedagogy is something I kind of had read about once, a long time ago, and when I came back, Montori reminded me of it, and I've started looking at it and kind of spiraling at how it works. So a good chunk of the research I'm doing is about punk pedagogy, and tying it into Montori's work, and then looking at the connections between my coursework and my teaching work. So when you look at my map, you'll see one side has connections and all the courses I took together to form a whole body of knowledge. They're also all related to my teaching, and I'm going to be bringing them in somehow if I haven't already, and that includes simply course design as well as content. So I've got all kind of map lines on it. And then I broke punk pedagogy down into a few of the qualities that I have found described. And the first 5 basically come from an article called Pedagogy of the Pissed by Seth Con-Egan. And he has a list of 5 things, and they break down into a DIY ethos or do-it-yourself kind of ethos. It's also passion. And he calls it a Nietzschean pleasure, but it's the enjoyment of work and of knowledge. He also talks about the endurance and the struggle to gain it, which ties into resistance, because he's also arguing about taking on the institutions. There's also in all of this, it comes more from Montori, but it's kind of mentioned in a lot of the punk stuff I've been reading, about building communities. And punk is itself, if you look, I'm not a huge music person in general because I'm kind of tone deaf. But if you look at the punk as an aesthetic and as a musical ethos, it's very all-encompassing. There's everything from Christian punk to metal punk to death metal punk to Islamic punk to totally liberal punk to socialist punk. It's all over the spectrum. So it's interesting that within punk each one is building a community together. So there's that. And then on my map I started pulling the classes that kind of related to each one. And so you can see in some places where I have like the do-it-yourself ethos, courses that related to that were things where I had to do a lot of and take ownership of stuff, and that was like children's lit and power of myth because there was a lot of creative writing in it. The simulation argument, which is my critical thinking class, again having to take responsibility for it. And then I said really all of them because that is true for a lot of them. And then passion, and I started listing some of the ones that I felt passionately about. For pleasure I put a big old all. And then some other stuff with pain and endurance, and some classes there, and the resistance. And then for those of you who don't know, and I know 2 of you do know, my mother passed away during the last course I took, which was the 6th grade ideas in December. So there was a whole lot of personal testing that went on to complete that class. And that kind of goes back to this pain and endurance, and that comes up, and it's maybe one of the reasons I struggled so much with that class. And then when it came to community building, I took a course called Counseling Skills for Non-Counselors. And that was all indeed about community building. So then I look at all of this plays into and will work into how I teach in some way. And I have my personal pedagogy at the bottom, which is what I'm working towards. And I have on one side creative assignments, because what I've learned is how to do more creative and critical assignments. Instead of a general, normal, straightforward character analysis, here's a character, tell me about that character, I've started assigning things like, okay, and I teach a comp course based on fairy tales. So we read Snow White. We read a story a contemporary story where someone's told it from the evil queen's perspective. So then I say, okay, here we're going to write Snow White and turn it around, and you're going to write it from this character's perspective. What would they know? How would they react? Would they think they are evil or what? So it gives them a different way to do something that's kind of standard. The idea of passion is you have to make students care about what they're working with, and I'm having a real struggle with that because I seem to have a lot of apathetic students. I have an assignment in mind to kind of kick that into gear, though. With the pleasure, it's giving more power and more decision to students and bringing that in. And then I've got over on one side student-centered and learning communities, all of which kind of will feed into what I hope becomes my own personal pedagogy, which I'm going to pull through all of this. Now, that's an awful lot to work with, and this is an ongoing life project as well as anything else. But it seems to me to be a very practical approach for me. But, it's a work in progress. But yeah, I have 2 different notebooks that I work in, and I have 3 maps just in this notebook that I didn't like, and I have a notebook at home that had like 4 maps, more than 4 that I didn't like. And the maps have been a struggle because of trying to work in the classes. At one point I had a list of all my classes with punk pedagogy in the middle, and I was trying to figure out. So this map has been something of a struggle, and I'm probably going to revisit it as I add more stuff from my review of literature, which I've got to get my butt working on, but I'm trying to find a few things still. Oddly enough, punk pedagogy seems very British rather than American, so I'm having to kind of finagle my way around some stuff. But all in all, I can kind of see this working for me now. In some way. I'm not going to guarantee the finished product at this point since I don't have a word on page. But it also seems to come straight out of what I was talking about in my threads paper. So I can kind of put some pictures together for me, or at least some puzzle pieces together for me. So I hope everyone else is having a good job and has a good map. I'm off to go read. Have a great day.